It's official. What started as a series of subtle economic signals under Mark Carney has now become something far bigger, a full-blown declaration of Canada's economic independence. Prime Minister Mark Carney walked into that press room today and did what no Canadian leader has dared to do in decades. He drew a line between Canada's future and Washington's influence. For months, Carney has been warning about it, that our economic dependency on Donald Trump's America has become a liability, not a partnership. That every tariff, every unpredictable trade threat, and every politically charged policy coming from the White House has left Canada hostage to someone else's instability. But today, that era ended. Because today, Mark Carney unveiled the final stage of the plan he's been quietly building since taking office. A blueprint for a nation no longer waiting for permission from anyone. A vision for a Canada that charts its own path, sets its own standards, and leads the world on its own terms. This isn't just about economics. It's about identity, about sovereignty, about a country reclaiming control of its destiny after years of uncertainty shaped by others' decisions. Carney didn't just announce a policy, he made history.
Build Canada Homes is a new entity. It leverages federal public lands, a large portfolio of projects, highly competitive financing to help create scale in a new factory-built housing industry that can help Canada build millions more of affordable homes. This is an industry that can cut building times by 50%, reduce costs by 20%, and lower emissions by a further 20%. And it's consistent with Canada's history. Our history is one of adventurers, risk takers, and above all, builders. Our country was forged by Indigenous peoples and voyageurs who built vast trading networks from coast to coast to coast before the Americans had even left St. Louis. Following the Second World War,
At the heart of this transformation lies what Mark Carney calls Build Canada Homes, a sweeping national housing initiative unlike anything seen in generations. But this isn't just about constructing buildings. It's about rebuilding the very idea of Canada itself. Carney is turning public land into public opportunity, uniting manufacturing, clean energy, and smart financing to deliver affordable homes at record speed. For decades, Canada waited for investment to trickle in from foreign markets. Now, under Carney, that waiting game is over. He's creating an ecosystem built entirely on Canadian resources, Canadian workers, and Canadian innovation. A self-sustaining housing industry designed from the ground up. And he put it simply but powerfully. We've always been a nation of builders, risk-takers, and dreamers. We will build again. In that single sentence, Carney redefined what leadership looks like. Where Donald Trump preaches nationalism through division, Mark Carney sells patriotism through progress. Confident, constructive, and forward-looking.
with our new Buy Canadian policy, whenever the federal government spends, we will select Canadian suppliers by default, rather than using the current best efforts approach. And this approach, this new approach, will extend to all federal agencies, all Crown corporations, such as Build Canada Homes, such as Alto, High-Speed Rail, and such as our spending from our new Defense Investment Agency.
Then came the moment that caught even the room off guard. Mark Carney unveiled a bold new Buy Canadian directive, a policy that will permanently change how Ottawa spends every single dollar. From this day forward, Canadian suppliers aren't just an option, they're the standard. Every department,
Every Crown corporation and every major project will now prioritize Canadian companies first, whether it's infrastructure, rail, housing, or defense. All of it built with local materials, local workers, and local ambition. For generations, Canada's supply chains have been dominated by the United States. But today, Carney flipped that script. He turned Made in Canada from a marketing slogan into a guiding law of governance, a strategic masterstroke that transforms economic independence into national identity.
There are these challenges abroad, and there's two potential responses to the challenges that we face as a country. And the first is to stick to the plans designed for the old world. Hunker down, slash the deficit, and wait for the trickle down. But in order to do that would mean getting rid of our key social programs, or the federal government eliminating all the health, education, and social transfers that we make to the provinces and territories, and at the same time not making these big investments in what we need right now. We choose a different path, to invest boldly in our future, just as Canadians have done in the past. We choose Canada.
Carney didn't just talk policy, he made it personal. We stand at a crossroads, he said. We can keep walking the same worn path of austerity and dependency, always waiting for help that never comes. Or we can take a different road. We can choose Canada. The words hit like a current through the room, sharp, electric, and unmistakably real. Because for the first time in years, a Canadian Prime Minister wasn't talking about catching up to the world. He was talking about leading it. And when Mark Carney said those words, they didn't sound like political theater. They sounded like a turning point. For the first time in decades, Canada isn't trying to sound like America. It's finally learning to sound like itself.
I'm just having a hard time wrapping my head around when it comes to the forestry sector in New Brunswick. It's 1 out of 49 firms are involved with the forestry sector.
Yeah, a hugely important sector. Yeah,
$2 billion go to the United States. I'm just wondering if you can explain a bit more, looking at that focus, how a Buy Canadian movement can even begin to make a dent on that front.
It's part of the answer. It is part of the answer. Look, 75% of the exports from the forestry sector historically, New Brunswick goes to the United States. Slightly lower percentages for the country as a whole. The U.S. is trying to shut out our forestry products. Okay, let's be clear. Let's be absolutely clear. And we can do several things in that context. One is, yes, buy Canadian and build more at home. Secondly, diversify internationally, and third, expand what we do with forest products. And of course, all of that is in the context of, in parallel, negotiating with the Americans and trying to get a good deal for the forestry sector. In which case, we are doing other things, or we're prepared to do other things that the Americans want in order for the forest product sector to get greater access. But it's a negotiation. And if I can bring it back to where I started, this is not too strong a word, this is a radically different U.S. trade policy than anything we've seen in our lifetimes, okay? It's radically different. They've changed the rules, or their interpretation of the rules. And that's what we're dealing with. And that's why we need to move fast. That's why this budget is the right budget. That's why we're looking to have $1 trillion of investments. So yes, we have as many jobs as possible in forestry, but we have many more jobs being created elsewhere in New Brunswick and elsewhere across Canada. And at its core, these are all things that we don't have to ask permission for. We don't have, we control, we decide, it's our future, we're taking it, we're moving forward. And then we spend less time on our press conferences, in the business suites, around the kitchen table, talking about what the Americans are doing and might do, and just what we're doing to build this great country. And that is what we're going to do. We're going to build this great country.
When journalists pressed him about Donald Trump's latest trade policies, Carney didn't flinch. He called them what they are: a radically different U.S. strategy driven by short-term politics instead of long-term vision. But instead of complaining, he doubled down. Canada, he said, will no longer play defense. It will write its own rules. It wasn't diplomatic, it was decisive. And that's exactly why the press conference went viral. Carney wasn't speaking as a negotiator, he was speaking as a leader. He reminded everyone that while Trump's America might be unpredictable, Canada doesn't have to be. Then came the number that caught every analyst off guard: $1 trillion. That's the total scale of his new national investment plan. Housing, infrastructure, clean energy, AI, and advanced manufacturing, all guided by one vision: to make Canada economically unshakable. He summed it up in one line: we don't have to ask permission for our future. We control it. In that moment, Carney buried decades of dependency and turned confidence into policy. Canada's new identity, independent, ambitious, and self-sufficient, was now official. And then came the closing moment, the one destined to define his leadership. He looked straight into the cameras and said, "Let's spend less time talking about what the Americans are doing, and more time building this great country." It wasn't anger, it was resolve. Because this wasn't just an economic announcement, it was a declaration of identity, a signal that Canada's time as a dependent partner has ended and its era of a confident global player has begun. In one afternoon, Mark Carney didn't just announce policy, he reshaped a nation's mindset. For generations, Canada measured its power through proximity to America. Now, under Carney, it's defining power through independence. Build Canada homes, buy Canadian, $1 trillion investment. Each piece is part of a larger vision to build a country strong enough to thrive on its own terms. Carney didn't shout, he didn't grandstand. He simply drew a line and said, "We control our future." And in that quiet moment, he didn't just sound like a prime minister. He sounded like the founder of a new Canada. You're watching Canada Newsline, where the stories shaping this nation's next chapter are told first. Subscribe and stay with us as we track every step of this historic transformation in Canada's identity and future.